not, Cradle of Filth was actually a very controversial band at one period of time. Might be hard to believe, considering here in 2018, controversy is something that is almost expected of just about anybody and can be derived from just about anything. Whether it's a photo, whether it's something that you said in an interview in 1987, whether it was something that your parents did back in 1934, it doesn't really matter. Controversy seems to brew from just about anything, and Cradle of Filth is not a band right now that really is seeing a lot of that controversy. You only hear about this band these days if they add or lose a member, or if they're releasing a brand new record, which is not a bad position to be in, quite honestly. It means that your name is known and still respected, but at the same time, your nose is kind of out of the limelight. You have freedom to do a little bit of anything that you want. Well, amazingly, we have to be controversial. We have to talk about the hate. We have to talk about those that don't like this band, who never liked this band, or who liked them at one point, but now no longer do. And we need to construct reasons. How many reasons? 5 reasons why people hate or hated Cradle of Filth. And we're going to start, of course, with number 5. Number 5 is that they're a misrepresentation of black metal. This is something that you're going to traditionally hear from genre purists. Don't know what a purist is? If you know that one person that's on the school bus that argues with you incessantly about what kind of rap Little Uzi Vert is, that's a purist. They have those in heavy metal as well, and black metal is certainly one that is going to have quite a bit of those, considering they believe that the only true black metal is cult black metal. However, with Cradle of Filth, they had black metal beginnings whenever they first got started in the early 1990s. However, they gradually migrated away from that personality, instead opting to add other elements to their sound, such as the speed of thrash metal or some of the over-the-top natures that you see in death metal. Now they're merely known as an extreme metal act. And because of this, black metal purists no longer associate themselves with them. Either that, or black metal purists now say, well, they were never actually black metal. They were actually melodic black metal, or they were actually blackened death metal, or this or that, or these or those. It's a really silly reason to dislike a band. However, with a purist, they have only one thing and one goal in mind, and that's to get the black metal that they want. Which, can you really argue with that? I guess not, but it's still really stupid. Number 4, their music became predictable. Now, this is something that happened near the, really in the second decade of their career, and at that point in time, is this really something that should be considered an argument? Well, in this case, there is a really good point to be made, considering from their start to about the first part of the 2000s, Cradle of Filth's albums all had something that made them a little bit different, that made them a little less like their predecessor, whether it was stripping down the sound from something that was black metal to more of a traditional extreme metal, injecting a little bit of this or a little bit of that. It was something that always felt a bit new. However, starting with Amphetamine and going on to a couple of records that succeeded that one in the middle of the 2000s, the music started to sound a lot like the same thing with each passing album, that not as much of that diversity was really being injected in. Instead, it was very focused. It felt very streamlined, very derivative, almost as though this was music that was being churned off in an assembly line, and the only thing that made it unique or different was subject matter and where Danny Filth, registered his trademark screeches. One way or the other, this actually caused some folks to step away from the band, or really fall out of love with this band, or just simply not get into them, considering everything that they were hearing sounded exactly similar to the last song that they had heard, and really not taking the time to dive back into their prior discography to really see that this band has a lot of creativity and a lot of different tools that they're able to utilize, and a lot of different sounds that they're able to offer. Like I said, seems like a really silly reason that people now hate the band, but now you have a lot of folks that feel that whenever a Cradle of Filth album comes out, they know exactly what it's going to sound like prior to it even being released. And that could also be coupled with number 3, that they sold out. Now, this is something that also happened right around the same time. Coincidence? Maybe so, maybe not. Right around the turn of the 2000s, Cradle of Filth started to get some attention over in America. They had it before, though it was mostly in the underground. However, what was the real turning point was whenever they made their way to Ozfest. Ozfest, that festival, with the guy and the bands and the stuff. And Cradle of Filth was a main stage, or not a main stage, rather a side stage headliner for Ozfest in the early part of the 2000s. And immediately it seemed like after that their music started to become derivative. They got a lot of acclaim for their performance, and they certainly gained a big-time fan base that perhaps otherwise would have never discovered this band without the power of the internet. one way or the other, it definitely seemed like this band was all of a sudden becoming more predictable, that they were all of a sudden becoming a little bit more visible, that all of a sudden you turned on 120 Minutes back whenever it was in its revival, either that or you turned on anything that had to do with the metal press, went on the internet to find anything to do with heavy metal, and Cradle of Filth was being mentioned or shown or displayed prominently. All of a sudden, they looked a lot more like a product rather than a band. And because of that, a lot of folks felt that their favorite band, or at least a band that they respected, had sold their souls to the devils themselves, whether they be record companies, executives, advertisers, or the like. And it was something that caused a very, very strange parting to happen, a very, very bad breakup to happen, one that caused them to become separated from a band that they at one point really enjoyed. The hatred, though, came whenever it seemed like it was never ending. And really, this is a band that only has felt like they have really gotten back to some of those creative ways from their early days, only just recently. Number 2, their image and their t-shirts. This is probably one of the biggest reasons that you're going to get, which is why it's at number 2, obviously. But this is one that's really the hatred by most non-fans. Of course, t-shirts and merchandise are a very important way to showcase and utilize, what kind of band that you are. However, of course, in some extreme forms of metal, they find it a way to be absolutely offensive, and Cradle of Filth was no different, with shirts such as Jesus is a cunt that you saw, with other sorts of images that showed crucified, upside down Jesuses, either that or, just a crucifixion or Mother Mary. There was a lot of different ones that you could actually search in order to gain what you need to know in regard to what these t-shirts were all about. Now, this is all well and good. If you're a heavy metal fan, you know that this is just a band, and they're not necessarily tied to these, or it's all just for the art's sake, but no. You have to remember, controversy these days versus controversy in the past is very, very different. And the controversy with these t-shirts came from, of course, Christian conservatives, from the different folks that felt like this was a representation of what their children were going to become, this is what their children were, that this is what heavy metal was all about. It became an easy way to generalize what heavy metal was all about. And of course, the offense was one that caused a lot of people to hate and outcry and demean this band and feel that they are not worthy of consumption. Now, it's not so bad, or not as bad as the treatment that Marilyn Manson got at the tail end of the 1990s. But you have to remember that Cradle of Filth also didn't reach the level of success of Marilyn Manson at the tail end of the 1990s, nor did they have a Columbine-like event, where Jesus was resurrected, just to have a heavy metal band, hit him over the head with a flying V, where it really caused them to become a little bit more of a household name, where it was on televisions nationwide. However, those that did see these shirts were absolutely rattled and certainly hated the band and hated anybody that was associated with them, those metalheads based off of that. However, there is still one more reason why Cradle of Filth has certainly gained a lot of hatred, and it's something that they really can't do much about. And that's number 1, Danny Filth's voice. Yeah. Now, this is something where you sometimes will scroll through articles, or you'll scroll through comments on YouTube and see, well, this music is great, but his voice sucks. Danny Filth might as well be the originator of why these comments even exist. Danny Filth has one of the most unique voices in heavy metal, and probably one of the most unique voices in all of music. And it's something that's utilized that has such a wide range, from very low growls to high as hell screeches, that cause for their music to actually have sort of this painter's palette really right in front of them. They have this strange tool that is able to craft something that is never heard before. However, this is one of the biggest reasons why folks don't get into the band. They can't get into the high howls. They can't get into the screeches. They can't get into the low growls. They need something, or they feel like they need something that's a little bit more consistent. Either that, or they're boring as a music fan and need something that's at a bass line that has just a narrow range right there. Then anything with a wide arc is immediately considered to be information overload. And that's exactly what's happened with Danny Filth. One of the largest reasons that I've seen, at least, for why somebody dislikes Cradle of Filth or simply can't get into them as a band is because they have tried to listen to the material and Danny Filth's voice simply turned them off. Now, you have to understand, the cases that I've talked to, most of those have been tame. There are those that have taken this to the extreme, that have absolutely taken this to the point of absolute hatred, that they absolutely wish, and even started a petition at one point, that Cradle of Filth get a brand new singer. This is something that went absolutely nowhere and is pretty much disappeared from the void. However, that's something that I can recall from my youthful days on the internet, laughing at, considering at that point, I just turned into a Cradle of Filth fan. I just started to really appreciate Danny Filth's voice, and really appreciate its wide range. So to me, it was funny. But these days, it's actually more hilarious than anything. Danny Filth's voice is one of the biggest reasons people hate this band, and it's something he can do absolutely nothing about. Not that he would want to, considering it's a voice that's so recognizable that now everybody who's a metal fan knows who he is. And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, 5 reasons people dislike, hate, or hated Cradle of Filth. If there's a band that you think needs to be assaulted, degraded, destroyed by the 5 Reasons series, of course, let me know in the comments below. Cover Killer Nation. I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.